What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to go through some of the FPL announcements that were made earlier today, because there are some things in there that are slightly different to what I spoke about earlier. Then we're going to go through some current thoughts ahead of the deadline, because although there are no matches, there's still some things to think about. And then, of course, we'll go through some of your questions at the end and my team as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well. So this is what FPL have talked about. Game Week 7 will roll over and no points scored, right? With no points scored. We already knew that. There's no matches. It's a blank game week. We're all going to score 0, whether you captain Haaland or Salah or even Ward in goal. We're all getting no points this week. This is where things get really interesting. Triple captain, bench boost, and free hit chips activated for Game Week 7 will be reinstated. So there'll be some people out there that have activated the triple captain and bench boost, and although you can cancel it, they're going to forget to do it. Maybe they've somehow missed everything that's going on, and they won't do it, but FPL will essentially give it back in Game Week 8 and onwards. There might not be any games in Game Week 8, but you get the point, right? And it's the same for free hit chips as well. Then with wildcards, they're going to roll into the next game. I didn't even know they could do that. I don't think they've ever done this before. But essentially, from the sounds of it, they didn't really spell this out completely, but we're just going to assume Game Week 7 deadline is going to tick over at exactly the same time, which is what I thought they would do anyway. But if you've wildcarded, it's not just going to go away. You'll then get to continue making transfers right up until the Game Week 8 deadline. And I can only presume that if all the matches get called off for Game Week 8, which we don't know yet, but if they do, that will then probably roll into Game Week 9. All I would say, because some people are now considering activating their wildcard so they can make use of kind of price changes this week, maybe in Game Week 8 as well, then over the international break to Game Week 9. I don't know what FPL will do if only some of the matches are on in Game Week 8. My assumption would be we get whatever team we've got at that point. So if you activate your wildcard now, I wouldn't say to cheat the system, but to hopefully get price rises for 7, 8 and into 9, and then there's only 2 or 3 matches on in Game Week 8, and you've wildcarded for that, that might not be ideal. So I probably wouldn't do it. You could, of course, just make that wildcard team in Game Week 8 so that it's got some players for 8 and then obviously works from 9 onwards. But I still don't think it's worth taking the risk for a couple of price rises. And also, of course, if you do that, you miss out on the free transfers before the wildcard as well. Because for those of us that haven't used our wildcard yet, we can use transfers in Game Week 7, 8 and 9 to possibly build a team and then delay the wildcard later, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So for managers who took a points hit for additional transfers, their scores will reflect the lost points they lost, right? So if you took a -4, a -8, a -12, you are still going to lose those points. Now, something that's interesting, if they're going to give the free hit chip back next week in Game Week 8, you could use your free hit chip this week. That will cancel the points hit, because once you do that, it always cancels points. It's just like a wild card does. And then you're going to get that free hit chip back next week. Now, I don't think FPL will be able to, or even bother, differentiating between those that use the free hit before this announcement and those that used it after. I can only assume they're going to give all the free hit chips back if they're used this specific week. So you could use that as a way to cancel the points hits, but don't come back to me if it doesn't work. I'm just assuming it will from what they've said. So if you've taken a hit, you could free hit, then get obviously your points back, and then your free hit chip back next week. In head-to-head matches, we'll do this quickly because I'm not sure how many people play head-to-head. If neither manager made transfers incurring points deductions, if basically you're head-to-head with someone else, neither of you take points, the match will be drawn, you get 1 point each, right? We can move on from that. It's just head-to-head. Postponed fixtures will be allocated to another date. Points scored in these fixtures will apply to the game week in which my voice has gone a bit there, in which the fixtures are played and not to Game Week 7. That always happens, right? These games, when they get put into a different game week, that will then be a double game week, unless they go and extend the season. But even if they did, like Game Week 39, 40, we would just score the points in those game weeks anyway. Lots of stuff can change at that point. Injuries, players that you had now might not be available later on. So that doesn't matter. That's normal, right? These are exceptional circumstances, and we appreciate the understanding of FPL managers while the situation evolves. And it definitely is exceptional circumstances. So although it's not perfect, I will say I think they've done a pretty good job with how they've handled it. So just some initial thoughts, not really too dissimilar to what I spoke about earlier today. So those on wildcard, you're really just starting to think about your Game Week 8 team now. Maybe there's not really much worth in putting too much thought into it, because obviously they could all just get postponed. Then you're suddenly looking at a Game Week 9 wildcard, but you could start putting a little bit of thought into it if you wanted to. Presumably, if Game Week 8 is fully postponed, they will just roll that wildcard into Game Week 9. So those that have activated in 7, you could still have your wildcard active all the way up until Game Week 9. again, I think they've set that precedent now that when there's an exceptional circumstance like this, and I think all the fixtures being postponed in Game Week 8 would still count for that, they will be able to roll that wild card over. It's worth saying they haven't said that will definitely happen. We're just going to have to assume at this point, and we will talk about Game Week 8 postponements in a second. For anyone who hasn't wildcarded yet, which is the situation that I'm in, you could build a team basically for Game Week 9. So use your transfers from Game Week 7, 8 and 9 to get your team looking good for 9 onwards, and just hope, maybe not hope, that's probably the wrong word, but just maybe assume that a lot of fixtures in Game Week 8 might be cancelled or postponed, and then you can build your team for Game Week 9 and possibly delay the wildcard a little bit later. I really don't see any reason why this shouldn't be the plan now, because if you get to Game Week 9 and your team doesn't look good, or you've transferred in a player and they've got injured, you can just wildcard anyway. So the play surely for any of us that haven't wildcarded is to try and get through Game Week 9 if we can, and if we can't, we just wildcard anyway. There's nothing really to lose unless I'm missing something. If I am, leave a comment below and let me know what that is. Some of the reasons you might do that is, you know how everyone was thinking about, or a lot of people were thinking about getting rid of Liverpool players before Chelsea in Game Week 8, before all of this stuff happened, and then possibly to get them back in for Game Week 9. You've got a similar situation in Game Week 11 and 12, where Liverpool play Brighton in Game Week 9, so you're probably okay to have them for that fixture. But in Game Week 11, they have Man City at home. So you could hold Liverpool for 9 and 10, and they're all Man City for 9 and 10 as well. The same applies to them. Possibly look to get rid of 1 or 2 of them before Game Week 11 with your free transfers, and then get them back in from Game Week 12 onwards. Because no matter what you think about Liverpool, I think most of us would agree they can probably get back to how good they've been in the past at some point, and it could be by Game Week 10, 11, 12, etc. And they've got Nottingham Forest away, I think, and Leeds at home in Game Weeks 13 and 14. So I would definitely want players like Salah back in my team. So it's just something to think about, that you could build towards Game Week 9 now with your free transfers, especially if you've got 2, like me. You got 2 in 7, 1 in 8, 1 in 9. That's 4 transfers to try and get your Game Week 9 team looking good without a wild card. And again, if it all goes wrong, you can just wild card anyway. I wanted to talk about possible Game Week 8 postponements. It's worth noting that at the time of recording, I do not know if any or all of these matches will be called off, and I don't think we're going to find out until after the Game Week 7 deadline. So if you can make a transfer that works for both Game Week 9 onwards and also for Game Week 8, that probably is the best move. Someone like Mitrovic, for example, springs to mind. Good Game Week 8 fixture, good fixtures from 9 onwards as well, but it's all going to depend on your own team. Now, it's worth noting there was a lot of kind of, not rumours, but like reports and speculation going around today that policing was one of the reasons that football could have been called off, right? Because they're going to need extra police in London and all that kind of stuff to manage the crowds, and therefore there might have not been enough for football. But most other sports haven't fully cancelled. Some of them did postpone things on Friday, and they might have moved things around, but ultimately a lot of sports and other events are going ahead this weekend. It's just football that have stopped. So for Game Week 8, it's a little bit tricky to know what they're going to do. It looks like they did it out of a mark of respect rather than because of policing and stuff like that. But as we get to the Game Week 8 weekend, we're going to be closer to the funeral. I know this all feels like weird things to be speculating and talking about, but that is the situation for FPL right now. And like I said earlier, it's an FPL channel, so that's what we're going to talk about. And I think the fixtures that are probably at most risk are the ones on the Sunday, because from what I've seen, the funeral, we don't even know when it is right now, but it could be on the Monday. So any fixtures on Sunday could be an issue, and I think any fixtures that are in London are definitely more at risk than other places, basically, in the country being postponed. So that Chelsea game at 4:30 against Liverpool, the latest game on Sunday in London, that could definitely be a big risk. And again, I am just speculating, I don't know for sure, but it's something to consider. Whereas the Friday games, Villa at home, Nottingham Forest at home as well, they've probably got the least chance of being called off because they're on the Friday. If the funeral's on Sunday or Monday, there are a couple of days before that, they could be played. And obviously, from a football perspective, a Premier League perspective, this is going to create an issue later on with all the fixture congestion. I'm not saying that is a reason to, make sure these matches are played, but it is going to be something they're thinking about for sure. So I think Villa and Forest are probably, and maybe even Wolves against Man City early on Saturday. Newcastle obviously is far, far away from London as well. I think from Spurs onwards, things get a little bit trickier. Obviously, Everton is not in London, I get that, but it is kind of on that Sunday, so that could be an issue as well. So it's not a case that all the fixtures will be off, but some of them could be. Football may just decide to cancel everything again, right, and postpone it to a later date. We're only going to find that out after the deadline probably. But this is the reason why I wouldn't activate your wildcard for price rises, because let's say Villa and Forest are on and none of the other games are. Is that worth having a wildcard for? Even if you build towards game week 9, you've then got an international break. I just don't see why I would do that. So just wanted to quick talk about Gameweek 8 postponements. We don't know yet, but that is me speculating a little bit out loud. So if you are now thinking about Game Week 9 in terms of kind of transfers in and wildcards and stuff like that, these are the teams with the best fixtures. It doesn't mean that we have to absolutely fill our team with only players from these teams, because players from Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, Arsenal might still be viable for sure, but these are some of the teams with the best fixtures. I should say that Bournemouth and Aston Villa also have some pretty good fixtures. I think the amount of options from those teams is probably a little bit limited. For Bournemouth, you're looking at Solanke. For Villa, maybe Watkins, possibly Luka Dean, but I don't see too many people putting those players in their teams. I guess it's not too dissimilar to Fulham, right? We're only really looking at Mitrovic, I would say, and Andreas Pereira has been on everyone's benches anyway, but I just wanted to mention those two teams. The other thing I would say, if you are trying to build towards a game week, so basically where you use your transfers for Game Week 9, then possibly use your wildcard in Game Week 12, then I would focus more on the fixtures between Game Weeks 9 to 11. So if you look at Leicester, for example, yes, their run from Game Week 9 to 13 is okay, but Wolves away, Man City at home, not necessarily ideal. Whereas from Game Weeks 9 to 11, Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Crystal Palace at home, that looks pretty good. And even if you wanted to delay the wildcard to Game Week 13, they then have Leeds at home. So one player I'm really keen on is Maddison. I think he looks like a pretty good option. I know Leicester have been playing really poorly, but I just think with those fixtures, that is the time when you have an upturn in form. So he was someone I would look at. And I've got to be honest, if I had Everson and Ward right now, I'm sure most of you don't, but if I only had to have them for Forest at home, Bournemouth away and Palace at home, I think I would risk it before wildcard. I don't think I would bring another keeper in. I know that's going to sound crazy because they've done so bad, but those three fixtures are pretty good, right? And then you get to wildcard out of it anyway. So definitely keep an eye on Leicester. I think with Crystal Palace, I'm definitely interested in Zaha. The fixtures from Game Week 10 onwards are really good. You don't necessarily need him for Game Week 9. I don't think he's an awful player to play against Chelsea because he is their talisman. He's going to play a lot. He's always, if they're going to score, it's usually with him involved on penalties and stuff like that. But Game Week 10 is when you really might want him. So if I'm looking at my transfers, for example, I might go for Mitrovic first, because he's got Newcastle, West Ham away, Bournemouth at home. Then maybe Maddison, Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, Palace at home. And possibly try and work out a way I can get Zaha in for Game Week 10. So that might be a way to think about it for Crystal Palace. You could also look at players like Guaita or a defender if you want someone in who's nice and cheap for that run from 10 onwards. With Newcastle, I've put them in. They don't really have like a positive swing, I would say, from Game Week 9. If anything, I would say that if Game Week 8 is postponed, or if Newcastle's fixture's called off, which, again, it's not definitely going to happen for sure, but if it is, I would say Newcastle are a worse team to target than they would have been if none of this had happened, right? Because the West Ham away in Game Week 7, they had Bournemouth at home in Game Week 8, so people were looking at that as a good block. Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, Brentford at home from Game Weeks 8 to 10. But suddenly you look at it here, Fulham away, but a lot of us are expecting Mitrovic to get points in most games. So are the likes of Trippier and Pope going to get a clean sheet? I would say that's fairly difficult. Brentford at home is okay. Then you run into Man United away, which again could be tricky. Newcastle, the way they're playing, might get some kind of a result there, but I think they would concede. And look, Isak's a good option, but there's lots of good forward options. I think for Newcastle, the main two players are really Trippier and Pope. Everton at home, good fixture. Then it's Spurs away. So I think Trippier as part of a rotation might be good. But I think if you're having to play him every single week, to have full... I know I've got it green, right, because they do concede a lot of goals. But from a defensive point of view, Mitrovic is a handful. So Fulham away, Man United away, and Spurs away in the space of 5 game weeks, maybe not quite as good. So it's a tricky one, because if there's a chance those fixtures are on in Game Week 8, you might as well go for Newcastle, because then, like I said, you've got Bournemouth, Fulham, Brentford. But from Game Week 9 onwards... It's not that they're bad picks. They're just slightly worse picks than maybe they would have been if none of this had happened. That's all I'm trying to say. And obviously then you got Chelsea. We all know their fixtures are pretty good. Again, they've got a lot of away games there. Palace, Villa, Brentford away. It's not necessarily going to be easy for them, but I've got high hopes for kind of Graham Potter. Hopefully he can get them a little bit more organised, a little bit more solid in defence. I think Reece James looks great. Outside of that, we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Kulusevski and Chilwell in terms of their minutes. But Fofana at 4.4 million is going to be a pretty good option as well. Okay, let's go through some of your questions. So this is about transfer priority. Do we start planning to bring players in who are more likely to increase in price first before anyone else? The only way I can see why you would do this is if you're definitely going to wildcard in game weeks 8 or 9. Therefore, you can use your transfers beforehand to try and get some more squad value and stuff like that. But if you're not wildcarding, then I don't see why you would do this. You're only goal really should be to bring in the players that you actually want for game week 8 and especially for game week 9 onwards. Price should really be an irrelevant factor to that. Of course, if there's a player that's going up in price and you want them from game weeks 8, 9 onwards, then yeah, you should definitely look at them. Trippier, for example, might go up in price. I did tweet that I think FPL should freeze the price changes while all this is going on, but I don't know if they will. I think when COVID first hit and there was no matches, but the deadlines continue to tick over, I think price changes still happen. They did slow down eventually because obviously people just gave up making transfers and stuff like that because it was pointless. But it is worth noting that prices may still change. Players went down in price last night. There's nothing to say that that won't happen Saturday, Sunday, and obviously onwards as well. But ultimately, you should be getting in players that you actually want, unless you're wildcarding, in which case, yes, make transfers for money increases. So I kind of already touched on this earlier on in the video, but I just want to go over it again just for anyone that's kind of not clear about it. So I have 2 free transfers. Do I need to use them by tomorrow or face losing it? Obviously tomorrow being the Saturday deadline, you may be watching this on Saturday itself. My only assumption is yes, you should consider using it because it looks like you're going to lose it. From what FPL tweeted, like their official tweets about kind of chips and stuff like that, they never mention transfers and they never mention the deadline changing. So it looks, like I said earlier today, the deadline will tick over. So the Saturday deadline will happen for game week 7. If all the games get postponed for game week 8, that deadline will still happen and we can still make transfers because they didn't acknowledge that at all. So we can only assume that transfers are going to work in the same way. So if you've got to, like I have, I'm definitely going to use one before the deadline tomorrow. You might as well. So nice and simple, what should we do with Kulusevski? Now, to be fair, in game week 8, Spurs have a really good fixture against Leicester at home. But if that's the case, you've got a one hope that that fixture goes ahead. As we've already discussed, there could be postponements for game week 8 fixtures. And even if it does go ahead, you've then got a hope that Kulusevski starts. So I think in the medium to long term, and possibly in the short term, even using a transfer this week to get rid of him might not be a bad choice. We have to just assume that he is a minutes risk, right? The last 2 games, Richarlison has started on that right-hand side. That now shows that Conte is happy to use him there, and also he's done really well. It is worth saying Kulusevski's done nothing wrong. I think he's had a pretty good season so far, but Conte now does have a bit of a squad that he can utilise. Players are going to miss minutes from time to time. Son has come off before the 75th minute quite a few times, and now Kulusevski has been benched for Richarlison on that right-hand side, and he got his 2 goals in the Champions League as well. So I just think Kulusevski, you could risk that for game week 8, he starts and that match goes ahead, but going forward, he's just probably not someone I would want to own because you're just not going to be able to fully predict exactly when he's going to start. Okay, so this one's about Marcus Rashford. People have been talking about Rashford being a good transfer, and absolutely yes, I have looked at him myself before all of this stuff happened. But if game week 7 and 8 are postponed, is he not a bit risky against Man City for game week 9? Absolutely yes. There are going to be players now that are better to bring in because they've got good long-term fixtures, and there are going to be players that are worse because their good fixtures are kind of right now or in game week 8, and then the fixtures aren't quite as good after that. And Rashford is definitely one of those players. Like if we look at the fixtures, game week 7 is obviously a blank. If he plays in game week 8, that is a good fixture against Leeds at home. Then it's Man City away, then it's another away game against Everton and also Newcastle at home. So I would say in this block of 4, it's not bad. But if we don't know that game week 8 goes ahead, then you've suddenly got to play him against Man City away. That is not ideal. I do think Man United can get a goal in that game, and Rashford in behind could definitely be the play, like on a counter-attack or something like that. But I don't think I would risk it now. And the other thing is, we did see towards the end of the Arsenal game that he and Martinez seemed to go off with what looked like knocks, right? Then in the training video, they were both in there before the Europa League game, but Rashford was not in the squad. Martinez didn't start, but he did come on. So that tells me there's maybe something a little bit more that's worrying Ten Hag. I don't think it's been mentioned. It could just be fatigue. It could just be a little knock. He could be fine by game week 8, game week 9. But if you haven't already transferred him in, I should say, I would probably delay it a little bit longer. If he's fit for game week 8, that match goes ahead, then he might be a good transfer in. But I don't know if he's a good one for game week 7 to basically use one of your transfers. So I just wanted to give you a few thoughts on my team. I know I kind of already discussed it in the video earlier today, but this is kind of an updated thing. I've had a few thoughts about what might happen next week, how my transfer kind of plan could work. I've got 2 free transfers for Game Week 7, so I will definitely use one before the deadline. Then, of course, we'll get another one for Game Week 8 and another one for Game Week 9, no matter what happens. I don't really see a situation, especially given now they've rolled the wild card and the rest of us can still make transfers, where they give us unlimited transfers. It's already a crazy season where we've got 2 wild cards, and then obviously unlimited transfers to the World Cup. I don't see us giving them them giving us another set of unlimited transfers. I think we're just going to have to work it out. Now, one move I've looked at is Jesus to Mitrovic, because he has a good fixture in Game Week 8 and obviously has good fixtures from Game Week 9 onwards. That's when Jesus and Arsenal's fixtures get a little bit poorer. They've got those 3 really hard home games in the space of 4 weeks. The problem is, if I get to Game Week 8 and the fixtures are on, apart from the Brighton game, which we know was already called off, that does leave me in a little bit of a tricky spot to then not have to use the wildcard in Game Week 9. I could definitely use 2 free transfers this week and then wildcard in Game Week 9, but it just makes it a little bit less ideal, because I don't really have a good way of dealing with this. I could just go gross to Rashford that week and just leave it at that, but I think Luis Diaz is someone I've probably got to figure out how I move him on sooner rather than later. I do think he could be a little bit of a minutes issue going forward, because Jota's now back and obviously he's now got a bit of time to work on that fitness. The only thing I would say, I think Diaz is probably first choice. I think we can all agree on that. And he has played a lot of minutes. I think Klopp trusts him. He's quite a fit player, etc. So it might not be a biggest issue, because if we go into Game Week 9 then, he's got Brighton at home. So that's not that bad. And then I would still have 2 free transfers to deal with Gabriel. I wouldn't be that bothered about having to play my 3 Liverpool players against them. But it's not an ideal situation, right? So that Jesus to Mitrovic move is not without potential issues. And I don't think there really is a great way in Game Week 7 to deal with it. Like, even if I did Luis Diaz to Maddison, for example, who's got really nice fixtures from Game Week 9, I've still got to deal with this Brighton kind of issue, and I don't have as much money to do it with. So I think I'm probably going to go Jesus to Mitrovic, but I haven't fully locked that in. If Game Week 8 is postponed, then I think the moves are to not have to use the wild card, Jesus to Mitrovic, and obviously I'm not going to know this, so I might just go ahead and then hope for the best in terms of from an FPL perspective, of course. Then go into Game Week 8, and then the move would be Luis Diaz to Maddison. Then we get into Game Week 9, and this would be the fixtures. Now, obviously, then Maddison's got Nottingham Forest at home. I've got Mitrovic for Newcastle at home. My 2 Liverpool players, I'm perfectly fine to play them against Brighton at home. Okay, it's not necessarily ideal having 2 Man City defenders against Man United, but they are both at home as well. So this move would probably be Greenwood, and this is where if I'm trying to hold off the wildcard until Game Week 12, Solanke in, I know he's not everyone's favourite player, and then Dunk to Sofal, because West Ham have some good short-term fixtures, and I could bench Gross, so I'd be playing 4-3-3. My captain this week, I don't know, it would probably be Haaland, might be Salah. Then in Game Week 10, I think I could probably roll. I don't think it's an ideal situation, but Salah against Arsenal away, Martinelli at home to Liverpool. At least I've only got 3 players in that game, and I'd probably just captain Haaland anyway. Mitrovic is still fine to play. Solanke's got Leicester at home. So even if I don't think Solanke's necessarily a good long-term move, he is pretty much nailed for 90 minutes and on penalties. And I know we don't expect Bournemouth to score many goals, but we saw last year when Norwich didn't score many goals, Pukki still got on that score sheet a few times. But basically, if they score, Solanke is probably going to be involved. So I don't mind him for the short term. And again, if this all goes wrong, I still have the option to wildcard if I want to. So I'd probably roll in Game Week 10 because Man City got Southampton at home. And then in Game Week 11, I'd have 2 moves to get rid of 2 of these Liverpool players or Man City players before they play each other. I don't know exactly which way round I'd do it, but the way I kind of thought about it was Cancelo to James for Villa away, and then get rid of Salah, possibly for Son. Have a lot of money in the bank, by the way. 2.6 million, but just go with this team for Game Week 11 and then wildcard it in Game Week 12. Solanke plays Fulham away. Mitrovic obviously plays Bournemouth at home. Maddison's still got a good fixture. Martinelli, who I've kept in the side the whole time, has got Leeds away. Son against Everton at home. Hopefully he's actually scoring by then. And then if I need someone off the bench, I've got Andreas versus Bournemouth and Gabriel versus Leeds. So I think it is possible to not use the wild card, but I don't think there's an ideal situation for my team where there's an obvious move to make this week to kind of ensure that I don't have to use it. So I might just do Jesus to Mitrovic and then just see what happens next week, because that wild card's in the back pocket. It can be used as needed. So let me know if you think I've missed anything in the comments below. Hopefully you've enjoyed that one and found it useful. I know there's not a huge amount to talk about right now, but obviously as we get more news, I will definitely keep you updated. So if you enjoyed that video and you did find it useful ahead of the deadline tomorrow, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Some people have asked me about a deadline stream. I wasn't planning on doing one, but enough people have asked me that maybe I will. So we'll see tomorrow. I'll decide how I'm feeling in the morning. Otherwise, I'll catch you again soon.